Welcome to the Adventurous Minds podcast, examining fitness and wellness through the lens of outdoor sport and adventure.
Welcome back to another episode of Adventurous Minds. It's your host, Timmy Summers, and today our guest is Greg Hill. He is known by many as the first person to ski 2 million vertical feet in a single calendar year. This gargantuan undertaking earned him the nickname 2 Mil Hill and solidified his legend in the alpine and ski communities. But in the decades since his record-setting achievement, Greg has spent a lot of time reflecting, primarily on how emission-intensive his adventures were and contributing to climate change, negatively affecting the places he loves. He has since pivoted his objective and is now on a journey to adventure in a more sustainable way. Green energy to and from the mountain, human power up and down the mountain. Greg is a lean, green, human-powered adventure machine. It makes perfect sense, but what he's doing is hard. Greg's fortitude is palpable, and listening to him speak will leave you inspired and motivated. Greg certainly inspired me, and he is paving the way, showing us that a more sustainable future is possible. Thanks for coming on here. I'm really stoked to get to chat with you.
Yeah.
Where are you right now?
Just sitting in my living room in Revelstoke, British Columbia.
Nice, man. Is it? Did you grow up in Revelstoke?
No, I've lived here longer than anywhere else, but I grew up south of Montreal and near the Vermont border in a place called Sutton.
Oh wow! How long were you there?
I grew up at east until I was about 16, and then slowly ventured out west. Moved to Revelstoke when I was 24.
Never left.
No.
Did you ever manage to go to school, or did you just go straight into the mountains?
No, I did a few years at university. Definitely thought I could try to follow the regular path that we're all supposed to do.
Yeah.
And as much as I tried, I rock climbed more than I went to school. So I realized that I was just wasting time and money.
Yep. I'm in the same boat. I managed to do kind of 2.5, 3 years. And then by the 4th year, I was like, I'm just wasting way too much money on this. Like, I'm spending all my time trying to get away from school and having other people do my homework. You know, this isn't going to work out for me.
Works well for some people.
Yeah. I mean, there's certain paths that it works for, but if you want to spend your life outdoors, then, it's better to get out there at a young age.
Absolutely.
Were you, did you grow up in a, outdoorsy family? Were your parents big skiers, or is that kind of something that, you ventured off to Revelstoke and discovered there?
No, Sutton in Quebec, there's a mountain called Mount Sutton there. So it's definitely a ski hill town. Not meaning that everybody skied there, but it was definitely a nice little ski hill. And I often think that I skipped school a lot with my parents, the 20 centimeter rule or whatever that is, 7-inch rule. If there was powder, we'd probably skip school. So I often think that one of the reasons I love skiing so much is it just kind of feels like I'm skipping school all the time.
Yeah. Yeah, I can relate to that. I was lucky enough to have my parents were kind of pulling me into the backcountry as well. And it's kind of some of my first memories are in the mountains. And it was really cool.
Yeah, we did some cross country touring out in the back Appalachian Mountains, but not really skiing so much, more just surviving.
Yeah, we did a handful of cross country as well. I mean, it's a brutal sport. I have to say, I was never like super fond of it at a young age. I remember thinking this is almost like, they're punishing me for trying to put me in the backcountry going cross country skiing.
Yeah, they're very awkward. I cross country ski a lot with my dog these days, and it's an awkward sport. It's definitely not as stable as backcountry skiing.
And you got to be so fit as well. It's not an easy sport by any means.
Well, it is if you're taking your dog for a walk and you're just...
Well, that's different.
Classic.
Well, so I really want to talk to you about Electric Greg, because that's that's running on Run TV right now. And I know it came out in 2020, but it's definitely been one of kind of my favorite movies I've seen recently. It's such a cool story to see, particularly in the outdoor community, because, these days it's all about getting helicopters up into the backcountry and doing the biggest lines and doing the craziest stuff. And to see somebody getting up there kind of organically without fossil fuels, it's rare and it's cool. Can you give a little bit of backstory on, how that movie kind of came about?
Yeah, I mean, I've never really loved all the fossil fuel intensity of most outdoor sports. I've heli-guided, I've flown in helicopters in 12, 15 drops a day. I've done it all. I had an F-350 snowmobile in the back, and there was always a part of me that as I was accessing the backcountry that I loved so much on that snowmobile, that it just like emitted this huge cloud of smoke after I drove my big truck with it. There's always this kind of like, oh, this doesn't feel 100% right. I'm kind of killing what I love while I'm loving it. So, so after my 2 million feet in 2010, I definitely was like, okay, that was an intense year. I used a lot of different vehicles, a lot of fossil fuels. And so I was like trying to figure out a way to see if I could adventure differently. And I spent the month of April in 2011 or 2012, spent the month of April just trying to bike to all my mountains and skiing and adventures. And I didn't use any gas that whole month, which was the first month I'd ever done that. But I'd be biking to these mountains. You'd bike, well, I don't know, 10, 15 miles, and then you climb 7,000 feet, and then you'd ski back down and you get back on your bike and you do those 10, 15 miles. And quite often my friends didn't really want to join for the biking part. And quite often they drive by me in a truck with a spare seat in it. And I was like, oh, this is cool. I'm doing it, but it's so bloody hard that there's not a lot of people that are going to really adopt to it. Because part of the idea was to see if I could do it. And the other idea was like, maybe I can inspire others to do it. And it just felt too hard. And then for quite a few years after that, I kind of struggled with what I was doing, but continued to fly around the world and adventure because I hadn't really seen any solutions that would work. And then 2014, I did this March Madness thing. I did the 100 or 330,000 feet up in a month, great skiing, adventuring every day. And then I got certified by the Association of Canadian Mountain Guides as a full ski guide. And so I was feeling really fit, really and knowledgeable and quite confident. Like some would say probably quite overconfident, especially right then. And then, so then I went to Pakistan, and I hadn't had a lot of adrenaline because of those courses and stuff. And I'm a bit of a junkie at times. And we were in Pakistan, as far from home and help as you could possibly get, on this 20,000 foot peak. And I decided to ski this dramatic looking line for the cameras for the Kodak Courage. And so yeah, I had that like super fit, overconfident Kodak Courage, and I ripped down into this face. I'm arcing these turns down it, which they show in Electric Greg. And instead of being safe and ski cutting the top, I just railed into it, because who wants to watch somebody ski cut? And would have been a dramatic ski cut. But anyhow, so I did about 3 turns in, I'm ripping my way down it. And all of a sudden I look over my shoulder, I'm like, oh my God, the whole thing is avalanching. And I look down the slope, and it's just avalanching everywhere around me. And I try to like ski away calmly to the side and go, almost jumping from block to block and almost making it. And then I got tumbled around and crashed down for like 1,500 feet in an avalanche. And this huge rescue, and lots of things happened. About 24 hours later, I finally got flown out of the mountains with a severely broken leg and a lot to think about. So I flew home and got surgery, whatever, in Canada. And then it was about 6 months or so. I can't even think how many months it was on the couch. I'd say at least 3. I kind of blurred them together to make them go by. But while I was on the couch, I was thinking, oh my God, like if I had just died, what legacy would I have left? Like, what would my kids have remembered? What would my friends, family, anybody, the world remembered about me? Guess that's important a bit, to just remember what the stories you leave behind. So I was looking and I was like, that's cool. I've motivated a lot of people to dig deep and to push their personal boundaries, and that's awesome. And I think we should all do that. But then I was also looking, I was like, well, there's a bit of a selfishness to the whole story. I was just kind of doing great things, but personal challenges, and not really giving back too much to the rest of the world. So that's when I kind of was like, okay, maybe I'll rewrite these next chapters coming up and use this little soapbox I'm standing on and try to see if I can promote change environmentally, because I kind of knew I hadn't been great.
So to kind of go backwards a little bit, when, before your 2 million feet, were you a super environmentally conscious person, or was this kind of something that you kind of got to the end of the 2 million feet, were like, wow, that was, expended a lot of fuel there?
Yeah, no, we grew up in a family in the forest, and we're definitely, environmentally minded. And then my older brother, Graham, he's 5 years older than me. He's been always pushing environmentalism. He started the website Tree Hugger. And he's definitely inspired a lot of change for people all around the world, plus myself being the younger brother. So Graham's always been pushing it. And, even during my 2 million feet, he did a talk on weekday vegetarianism, and super cool idea, where you're just a vegetarian for Monday to Friday and you eat meat on the weekends. And it was a way to kind of curb your impacts on Earth and also eat healthier. So he was talking about that in 2010. So we've always had, like, he's always been pushing the environmental conversation. And at the time he'd come over for dinner and we'd make sure that we fed him meat during the week just to bug him, but I wasn't really ready then, but it was definitely, Graham's always been super inspiring in that, pushing better, living better. So yeah, that kind of led to it. So yeah, I was sitting on the couch and I was like, okay, can I be a better person environmentally? Like, what can I really do? And the first thing I did was exactly what I just said, was the weekday vegetarian. I was like, okay, this is a decision I can make every day, and it'll actually have an impact on the world and on my health. So I started, Monday to Friday, we'd go vegetarian, and on the weekends we'd eat meat, and kind of been doing that for, well, probably about 4 years now, but then I've been a little soft lately, kind of flexing, still about 50-50 maybe.
Yeah.
You can never get too hard on yourself. Nothing's perfect. So sometimes we sway back, but yeah, so Graham kind of pushed me to that. And yeah, I was just really thinking, I was like, okay, here I'm an adventurer. If you look at Revelstoke, you walk around, the traditional adventurer here has a big truck. You got to have a big truck. You got to have that snowmobile. Like, that's how you adventure. And here we are. It's like our whole entire economy is based off nature and snow, and yet we're all just kind of thrashing it. So that's sort of when I started looking at the electric cars. They were finally coming around. There was finally some options. Sort of 2016 is where we're at now. So 2 years after I broke my leg, just looking at it, thinking, okay, like, what can I really do this? Like, there were Teslas and there was a couple of Leafs, but there really wasn't anything that had any range. The Tesla, but I couldn't afford the Tesla. I'm not that baller of a professional athlete. I wish. But anyhow, and I also like the idea of something that anybody could get, because at that point they were just kind of, above and beyond what most people can afford. And then 2017, we rented a Nissan Leaf, and my buddy Rubens and I skied the volcanoes down from Vancouver to California in this car that would go 100 miles between charges. And luckily the infrastructure was just in place for us to do that. And we climbed and skied 6 of the volcanoes down the coast and had this incredible electric adventure, and started to realize that it was possible. And then I started looking at, can I actually buy a car? And in 2016, I put it down for a Chevrolet Bolt. It was the first kind of like regular car that you could buy that had 200 miles, 220 miles or something like that, which is enough range for me. Majority of my adventures from home are within, it's about a 100-mile drive to Rogers Pass back, 150 kilometers, that sort of thing. So it seemed like finally the range was there. And if I could prove to the world that little EV could work in Revelstoke, this snowy, deep mountain, then maybe it was good to prove that it was possible. And honestly, in 2017, I know we're only 5 years later now, but the adoption of EVs has gone through the roof.
Unbelievable now. I mean, every other car I feel like I see is EV. It's pretty impressive. I mean, I honestly didn't think it would catch on this quick. I thought it was going to take quite a lot longer.
Well, you just had to see stories like mine, and it was just convincing that they worked.
It really is. I mean, because that's, I look at my my brother's a couple years older than me. He's out in the mountains every weekend, and he's looking to get a new car right now. And I'm kind of pushing him, like, maybe you should get an electric car. And he's like, well, I can't. I'm in the mountains. I need my gas. I need a truck. And I actually ended up sending him electric Greg, because I was like, I mean, you really don't. Like, you can survive without it.
Yeah, no, the options are getting better and better, but for sure what was neat is that I definitely, like any triangle, you convince one person, that one person convinces 2 more people, and it just keeps kind of filtering down. But it is really, I've had tons of people over the years that be like, hey, thanks for converting me into the EV. And I mean, I'm not some environmentalist that's just preaching this is the way. There's issues with EV, with the mining, there's issues sometimes with the electricity, and overall the studies show that regardless of all the impacts, that it's still better in the long run to drive electrically. But yeah, I mean, for me, I just kind of latched on because this was technology. This was something that we could all do. It wasn't like me biking to the mountains. It was something that anybody could do. We could all just get a car and drive to the trailheads and, make these choices.
So when you set out, you said you're going to go and do 100 mountains, was there any points in there where you were like, I actually don't think this is going to work, or this is going to be too difficult to make work? Were there any like real lows in this process?
Yeah, the filmmaker was hoping for more lows. I mean, Yeah, so I mean, I set out to do the 100 peaks. The 100 peaks wasn't really the challenge. I can climb 100 peaks. Um, the challenge was to just prove that it could be done electrically. And the lows, there weren't really any lows. There's some long charges here and there. There was a lot of like figuring out how to get from A to B and make it all work. And could I drive up into the bugaboos, right up way up into the dirt roads and that sort of thing. So there were those challenges. There was no real like low. But I was just trying to figure it out and kind of show that it worked.
Yeah. I mean, it's kind of unbelievable for 100 mountains in an electric car. There weren't any real lows, I mean, I was watching the film and I was like kind of expecting something not bad to happen, but something where you did actually run out of, fuel. There was that moment where you almost did, but it doesn't seem like you actually ever did.
Yeah, no, we definitely got it to zero quite often. A couple flat tires and stuff, but I've got strategies, so I'm always kind of planning and making sure that I could get that 100 miles to the next charger or whatever, and really just the whole time playing that game and watching it, you really do. Once you get an EV, you start kind of noticing when you're wasting electricity or not, and trying to really figure out how to hypermile it. For sure. Well, we didn't show it, but like the first time, those first volcanoes is to go into Mount Shasta in California. That was too far between chargers. So we were drafting behind trucks, like I don't even know, 5-10 feet behind them, and just like a road bike, and just hanging in there because we had to get over this pass. And so there were some hectic moments but yeah, no real lows, thankfully.
That's pretty cool. So when obviously the 100 mountains, like you said, wasn't like the big deal here. You can climb 100 mountains, but did you have a strategy to it, or is it kind of just like wake up and, pick a new one?
Yeah, there's no real strategy to climb the 100 mountains. There's more which ones were in season and ready. I basically always just wait for conditions to dictate instead of being forced to do things, just kind of whatever conditions work, and just kind of evolve it that way. You're like, okay, well, finally, Frenchman's is in, perfect. Let's go climb and ski Frenchman's. I didn't know I was going to do that, but the conditions are right. So, yeah, and then just definitely some road trips to get away to find some other mountains that were easier access because it's all off roadsides and stuff.
Did you, is there a memorable story or a particular one from one of these 100 mountains where, you kind of felt like you were really, everything was clicking and, you were doing something good for the world? Like, is there something that stands out there?
No, I use the cheesy expression that the EV was a vehicle for an idea, and it really just kind of helped me kind of go down the road of more change. They started doing the weekday vegetarian, add the electric car. Then you start looking at your footprint at home and seeing other ways that you can curb it. And then being a professional adventurer, I mean, it was like my sponsors like, oh, I guess you're not flying here or going there. And, there's definitely some hurdles to kind of convince people that this was a worthwhile story, and then I don't have to fly the whole way to Timbuktu to go ski something, that I can in fact create relevant ideas and stories that are, right here without flying around the world. But it really was like there's other changes. You start just looking at, oh, what about all these companies I work with? Is there changes that I can help inspire with them in terms of recycled products or who knows what? And then can I, help push them? And then even the nonprofit, I mean, Protect Our Winters USA has been going on for a while, but I started to Protect Our Winters Canada back in 2015 or something when I was on the couch healing and stuff. And, I did a lot of work starting it, realized that, again, much like university, paperwork's not my skill. And luckily this guy, Dave Erb, called me and was like, oh, I want to start it too. And I was like, okay, sweet. Here's the information I've got, webpage, all that stuff, and go. And since then it's been really great, because one of the better ways to have impacts is definitely to work with a nonprofit. That way you can kind of add your voice to others and make your collective voice bigger and kind of inspire change that way. And that was just another thing that kind of happened once I was driving the EV. It's like, okay, well, what else can we do? Oh, we can work with POW and try to, promote change in the world and kind of work our way that way. So.
Nice. One thing that's really interesting to me is like, this is obviously an amazing story of endurance, and, from the physical and mental side of it, were you, how hard were you training for all of this? If you're out in the mountains, or, and this doesn't necessarily just have to be electric Greg, but like, back in your 2 million feet, that's a real, spending that much time in the mountains, whether you're alone or with one other person or whatever it is. I mean,
I can't imagine how hard you must have been going at it. Were you on a crazy training regimen?
Training's kind of something that I was thinking about a lot today as I went out for a quick, I don't know, 6,500 foot climb up to this mountaintop. And I've always had a lot of training in me. I just, I'm never fully diligent for a full year of doing weights and workouts, but probably 6 months of every year, I spend some time doing push-ups, sit-ups, and working my core, and and then I'll fade away and bring it back. But I've definitely always got a bit of me that's like, okay, stay fit, stay fit. In the summer, I do a bunch of running. Back in my 2 million feet years, I was definitely making sure I do a lot of mountain running uphill just to get that power. And now I road bike a bunch in the spring when that in between time. And yeah, there's always fitness going on for sure, because especially now I'm 46, it's like if I don't stay on top of this, it's just it depreciates really, really quickly. But yeah, so I just keep training all the time. Just like I said, I just did 3.5 hour up and down 6,500 foot mountain, something like that, that type of relief. And then just, tomorrow I'll do a little bit of weights and core stuff and just kind of keep on top of it. Cause it's like, if you don't, you lose it so quick.
Yeah. Is there, are you following any routine, or is it most just like something active every day?
Yeah. I mean, I do loosely follow stuff. I'm definitely not a scientific athlete, but I mean, a couple of years ago, I was like, okay, I'm going to jam into the red line, 90%, over 90% effort. And we were doing some hill sprints. And then that was for like 2 months. I went out and I did some hill sprints and made sure I kind of really pushed it into the red. And, but yeah, just there's no real science. It just kind of keeps evolving. That's for sure. And it's got to be interesting for me, but yeah, I mean, I always stay on it. It just kind of makes me feel alive when I'm out there pushing it.
Yeah. And then I feel like I know the answer to this question, but do you follow any, obviously you're a weekday vegetarian, but is there a specific diet, or, are you do you have a process for how you get protein and all that?
No, I do like to eat real food. Like on big days, there's got to be a combo of real food and energy food. I basically start most days off with either some toast or some eggs, toast and eggs, or just toast, and coffee. But yeah, nothing too scientific, but I do, after my 3.5 hour workout just now, I came back and had a protein shake with some bananas and blueberries and turmeric and stuff like that. I'm always trying to put good stuff into my engine because it needs it.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm kind of in the same boat. I try not to get too scientific, because I think you can kind of get lost in that world. It's also not really a super fun place to be sometimes. You kind of just respond to what your body needs.
Yeah, I was thinking today too, I've got an inner coach, and there's this guy inside of me that is as mellow and relaxed as I like to be, or there's an asshole inside of me that pushes and pushes. And he kind of knows how to push me. He knows like what to say to just yells at you and stuff like that. But he's like, honestly, there's this other character inside of me that is like the pushing coach that just like, come on, you can dig deeper. Why are you slowing down? Let's go. Didn't you say you wanted to do this in 3 hours? But he's pretty funny, but he's been developed over the years and kind of knows my weaknesses and knows also how far I can really push. So it's kind of like a third person looking in and coaching me. Don't worry, he doesn't have a different voice or anything. It's just more thoughts and stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, speaking of kind of pushing it, how do you come up with these challenges? I mean, did the 2 million feet were you like on the way and then you just realized like I can push really hard this year and kind of get there? And, with Electric Greg, with the 100 mountains, is there any strategy to coming up with these different challenges that you're going for?
Yeah, I mean, I think I need them. That's how I keep progressing and keep staying fit, is by having certain goals. And I mean, initially the 2 million feet was just this intangible dream that I started with one day, because from tree planting, I planted trees in Canada where you get paid per tree, and you do all this math every day because you're getting paid per tree. You're like, I'm going to do 2,000 trees today at 15 cents, or like $300 or whatever. And I have this kind of math thing always going on. It's part of a way to distract myself, especially like today while I'm hiking. I'm like, oh, am I doing 2,000 feet an hour? Okay, perfect. I'll get this done in 2.5 hours or whatever. But there's always kind of this math going on. And one day I was like, oh, I just did 5,500 feet. And then I was like, oh, what's that times 365? And 2 million feet. And kind of it planted itself, but I had no idea I didn't have the mountain sense, I didn't have the fitness, but kind of spent many years working up towards it. And it was the ultimate dream that I was working towards. But during that time, I was like, okay, that's my yearly potential. What about, my daily potential? And that sort of came from the tree planting, where I was like, every day you're out and you're like, what's my potential? How much money can I make? And this was like, what's my potential? How much vertical can I ski? And I started doing, the biggest day around Revelstoke in the early 2000s was 20,000 feet. And I was like, oh, wow, that's cool. And I could probably do that. And that worked my way up and did a 20,000 foot day. And then next winter did a 30,000 foot day. And the next winter did a 40,000 foot day. And then basically worked up to 50,000 feet in 24 hours. And it was just really like, okay, what can I do? If I drive and push, and if that coach is just kind of urges me on, what's my potential with that? And I guess all these goals, I just like them because they keep me on edge and keep me training and focusing on things.
Do you ever feel any burnout? Do you ever need like just a week on a beach or anything like that, or you can't sit still?
Oh no, I sit still a lot.
You do?
Oh yeah, I read lots of books. I love just hanging out on the couch over here. It's a big couch. Can you see it? It's really big.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. But no, absolutely. I think there has to be that. There has to be down times every year. You have to, like, if you push too much, you just can't.
Yeah, it can't be sustainable when you're pushing that hard all the time. At some point, it's going to take a toll on you.
Yeah. And my body, it's pretty funny. If I take time off, I definitely not that I ever pack on much weight, but you can see my belly likes to put on a little bit extra fat. At some point we're going to be doing a 20-hour day. It's going to need to dig into some fat reserves and stuff. But no, I think everything has its peaks and valleys, and you have to really, you can't just stay at one point. You kind of have to keep moving.
Is there a mental side to it as well? Like, do you ever feel kind of, when you're spending that much time in the mountains, I don't know, it's definitely gotten to me before where it's like I kind of want some social interaction, or I need to go, I don't know, do something else. Do you have to do any mental training to kind of be able to endure what you do?
Luckily I like being by myself and I like my thoughts. So even though that coach is a bit of an asshole, I definitely keep pushing. But I do, one second. But no, I think there's a lot of mental training that goes on. Like when I start dreaming of some goal, I love the build up to it. I love kind of the manifestation of like, oh, can I do that? And then slowly training to get to the point where you're like, okay, I've done enough training. Now I can believe in myself and that I've done enough training to actually make this happen. And all that builds up to the success in the end is kind of that mindset. You're like, okay, I got to do this. I want to do that. Well, if I want to do that, I got to do 15 days of this. And you do those 15 days of that and you're like, okay, I've trained enough. I'm feeling it. And you slowly convince yourself that you're mentally ready for it. And then you give it a go. And ideally believe in yourself enough to push through and make it happen. But yeah, for me, it's all about definitely the manifestation and the dream stage where you just like, it becomes a focus that you're lying in bed at night. You're like, okay, I want to do that. Okay, how am I going to do that? And break it down and then figure out how you're going to do it and then put it all together and do it.
So, speaking of, what's on tap right now? Do you have any new challenges coming up, or are you kind of in a resting phase?
No, last year I all of a sudden, when COVID hit the year before in 2020, I was like, wow, what would, if all of a sudden I got COVID, long COVID, and lost all my endurance, like what are the things on my list that I'd love to do that I haven't tried, because who knows what's going to happen tomorrow. Like that's kind of what COVID really showed me too, is it's like life was fantastic and now it's altered dramatically and we couldn't see that coming. So that could happen with my fitness, with anything. So I've kind of looked at a bunch of my goals and prioritized the ones that really mean the most to me. And at some point I'm going to have no more goals. I definitely, it's evolving. But last year I looked at the Bugs to Rogers, or Rogers to Bugs, which is the Bugaboos. It's the ski traverse in the backcountry around here. And it's, I've done it in 11 days. We had this incredible trip. We did 11 summits on it. It was like this incredible traverse. And then I think the year after, maybe 2 years after that, some of my friends did it as a speed traverse and didn't do any mountains, but did it in 80 hours. And I was like, this idea of, wow, that's pretty neat. And then I've always wondered about it. I've always been like, okay, what if, could I do that? And so last winter started, did some training, did some longer tied in a bunch of 10,000 foot days and just kind of got to a point where I'm like, okay, because it's about 35,000 feet or something and about 100 miles, I guess. So yeah, I started thinking about that one. I was like, well, that's kind of one of the things I've dreamt of forever. Let's give it a go. And which was rad. So last winter in April 19th, two friends and I, we went out and set this new fastest known time on this traverse. And it was this incredible 53 hours of just like pushing through and climbing mountains and skiing down and back up. And it's one of the most wild trips I've ever done in the mountains. And then, so definitely got to keep those dreams alive. And same thing this year. I was like, okay, what are my other priorities? And there's been a challenge that I've tried quite a few times, and it's linking up these peaks. And I've tried probably 4 or 5 times, and I've never quite put it together. And I think I know how to do it this year, and I'm kind of training towards that to see if I could finally put that dream to rest. Also,
what's the barrier there? What's the missing link?
Well, I think years ago I did 11 summits on a day, and I didn't quite know the back range too well. Kind of knew there was some good descents, but I didn't really know it that well. And since then I've spent more time on there and know it a little bit deeper, and have a better understanding on how to tie it all together. But the barrier is, like most things, is just trying it.
Just getting out there.
Yeah, putting those feet, one foot in front of the other. So it's pretty intimidating. So ideally, I've kind of been focused on it quite a bit this year. I'm going to make that happen.
Are there any athletes or anyone else in the space that are kind of inspiring you with what they're getting up to right now? Is there, a climber or a mountaineer who's really pushing it?
I just finally watched The Alpinist the other day, which was quite amazing.
I haven't seen it yet. Everyone is telling me to watch it.
It's incredible. Like, I met Mark years ago and I was super impressed by him, but I didn't realize the extent of what he was able to make himself do. It was pretty phenomenal. His presence of mind and everything, and in the most unlikely of situations, is unbelievable. But yeah, put it on your list and watch it. Yeah, I mean, I've got lots of friends that are pushing, like Lucy is pushing all these steep descents and all these friends. But in terms of the endurance stuff in the mountains, I mean, Killian obviously is the hero. The heroes are on some other level, absolutely. But yeah, I mean, I think I've often thought that just anybody that's kind of pursuing their dreams or pushing themselves are pretty motivating and inspiring.
Awesome, man. Well, I kind of think that's a perfect note to end on. I think we kind of got through a lot of what you have accomplished, and particularly Electric Greg.
Yeah, no, I think that was something else I was going to say, and I was trying to think what it was. No, I pulled that in there. No, yeah, I think we kind of did a good circle around and got to the heart of it.
Yeah. Any final words?
What are you doing for Valentine's? It's 8:00.
Yeah. It's 8:50 p.m. in DC, so it's gonna be cook myself some dinner, single night.
I know.
Happy Single Awareness Day.
Oh, it's Happy Single Awareness Day.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Be aware of yourself and your strengths and who you are, and be happy with that.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Adventurous Minds. I hope you enjoyed it, and if you want to stay up to date with the latest releases, you can scan the QR code or find us on Instagram at Adventurous Minds Pod. See you out there.